Paul Watson joining us from the United Kingdom. Headline at prisonplanet.com, state of war between two Koreas after armistice ended. This is a big deal. And you add to this all the military forces moving around the globe from Eastern Europe through Central Asia, right into the Far East and the Korean Peninsula. This is serious business. Paul Watson.
Well, Alex, good to be back.
Good to have you here. Break down your take on what's happening right now, and then let's get into who really gave North Korea and Pakistan the nukes.
Well, as you just mentioned, North Korea is now repudiating the 1953 armistice, which was it wasn't a peace treaty, it was just basically a ceasefire that ended the Korean War. And now they're saying that is now not in effect, according to an official statement by the Korean Central News Agency. And they're also saying that any attempt to inspect North Korean vessels, which South Korea has said it will do with U.S. help, with the U.S. running the program, will be countered with, quote, prompt and strong military strikes. And we know that as soon as North Korea does anything against South Korea, then the U.S. is going to come to South Korea's aid. North Korea is allied with China, and just as during the Korean War, the Chinese military will support North Korea. And that will only be emphasized more so with the fact that U.S. troops, if they're sent over there, will be right on the border with China, because China borders North Korea. So that's how serious
Exactly. I hadn't even made that point, that over 1 million Chinese troops were engaging the Marine Corps and Army and Air Force during the Korean conflict, as it was called. This is insane.
Right. So, the armistice in 1953 wasn't even signed by South Korea. It was signed by the U.S. and the United Nations. So, technically, North Korea and South Korea have always been in a state of war because they never signed a proper peace treaty. But that fragile ceasefire, that armistice, was still virtually in effect until today, when North Korea completely renounced it and basically declared that they're now in a state of war with South Korea. And if South Korea makes any movement whatsoever, then they're going to attack. Whether that's believable with what Kim Jong-il said in the past remains to be seen, but it's a very serious situation. Because if you remember, on the eve of the Iraq War in early 2003, when the threat of Saddam Hussein was being propagandized by the U.S. government in the media, the non-existent threat, as was soon to be revealed, Kim Jong-il was saying that he was going to, quote, destroy the world, and that was played down at the time by the media and by the U.S. government because they didn't want such obvious saber-rattling while they were trying to make the case that Iraq was the major threat, when Iraq was displaying fealty to everything that the U.S. and the United Nations was doing in terms of inspections. But now we're hearing the same rhetoric by Kim Jong-il out of North Korea. Not only by him, obviously by Japan as well, as you mentioned before. They're threatening to attack. But now it seems a lot more serious because of this second nuclear test. Now, what was interesting about the first nuclear test was that originally they claimed that North Korea didn't claim, but the Russians and others claimed that it was 50 megaton blast. It turned out to be 1. And the latest one has turned out to be less powerful as well. It's only turned out to be about a quarter of what it was, the power that it was originally.
Exactly. These are tiny A-bombs. If they're even that, they're probably just packing those tunnels full of a football field of TNT to register on the Richter scales, because they're not picking up uranium and plutonium. We are breaking down the geopolitical angles to all of this and open phones throughout the broadcast today. Got one of the C-Think production guys that put out the New World Order film popping in for about 15 minutes at the end of the show today. to give his comments on the incredible success of the film, but also the different sides that are attacking him. The left is attacking him, saying, how dare you make these people look so good? Some Ron Paul people are calling him, saying, hey, you did this as a hit piece against Ron Paul, the time to 9/11 truth. That's kind of the mainline Republican ninnies. Hey, now Michael Savage says the government stages terror attacks, and he's afraid Obama's going to do it. You guys are so stupid out there. And some of the other things that are going on. So that is coming up. And we're talking to Paul Watson. Paul, the world is a dangerous place. Governments killed conservatively, just the big governments, 200 plus million people last century. In fact, I show 200 million killed in Endgame and forgot to put what the Soviets did. I just messed up on the graph when I was telling the graphics guy. So it's 250 million at least. But let's just be conservative and say 200 million, because I did put the communist Chinese in there. I mean, government's the number one cause of death, unnatural death. And they're running around jockeying for global dominance and power. These people are bored. All the money, all the sex, they're sick of it. They want war. They want power. This is the big game. You know, they call the most dangerous game hunting people, and you can still do that in Africa today. And it's been done, you know, by many ancient cultures. The Romans did it. The Babylonians did it. The Aztecs did it. Native Americans did it. Some of the tribes would capture other tribes and hunt them. Some of the Gaelic groups would do that. The point is, humans do this. Well, the elite do it on a mass scale. And, I mean, Paul, looking at the RAND Corporation document, I know your article gets into that. Let's get into RAND Corporation wanting war from your angle, needing war, what they said. And it's all tied into this masterpiece you did, and Kurt Nemo's done a similar excellent piece that covers some of the other angles. State of war between two Koreas after armistice ended, prisonplanet.com. Paul Watson, Kurt Nemo, North Korea ends armistice, threatens to attack South Korea. That's Infowars.com. Different perspectives, different angles, because there's so many different stratas of this story. Watson, let's get into the RAND Corporation situation. Historically, what this means. It looks like battle lines are being drawn globally, and then let's explain who's given the nukes to Pakistan, who's given the nukes to North Korea, and who's even given the nukes, U.S., England, and Israel, and Halliburton to Iran. I mean, this is incredible. Every time it's the same people. And the question is, why do these countries take, it's like all the old Westerns where the evil guys just shot the little pan miners, been out there panning some gold, and there's a lot of true stories that these Louis L'Amour books and things are based on, and they come up and shoot the old daddy panning for gold, and his 12-year-old gets up and starts throwing punches at the bad guys sent by the railroad to steal the claim, and then they throw a gun down at the kid's feet and say, pick up the gun, kid, pick it up. And the kid picks up the gun and they shoot him. Anyways, I'm ranting, Watson. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, the RAND story was something we reported on in October last year, and it was a story that came out of the Chinese media, which is obviously state media, but there was no apparent motive to making the story up. And it said that the RAND Corporation had gone to the Pentagon and lobbied for a new war. They said they needed a new, bigger conflict. North Korea was mentioned, but it was ruled out because they said they needed something bigger. Now, obviously, North Korea on its own is a small country, but if you're talking about American troops on the border of China, then that's World War III, if it escalates. They also mentioned Japan. Whether in the context they could attack Japan or set Japan up is unclear, but we know that Japan, yesterday, their former defense minister, who's still in the ruling government, said Japan should basically abolish its pacifist constitution so they could attack North Korea with cruise missiles. So Japan could be involved in that way. But yeah, North Korea was mentioned by RAND, but it was apparently ruled out at the time. My only hope is that this doesn't escalate, because the impression, from what I understand, is that China treats North Korea in the sense of keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. So with that, if that's the case, I would hope that China is prepared to sacrifice North Korea for the purposes of not escalating this into what could potentially be World War III. And from what I've read, Chinese military officials are talking to Russian and South Korean military officials on how they can defuse it. So hopefully that will be the case. But these things can escalate out of control. I mean, Pakistan and India were on the brink of nuclear war in 2002. And people don't understand how close that came to being a reality. So these things can escalate quickly. And the fact that I'm in China next week, obviously, because China borders North Korea, I hope that it doesn't escalate, but it'll certainly be an interesting 2 weeks in China if it does.
An interesting choice of vacation destinations. I think Switzerland was better last year when you went there, Paul. And closer to home, but yeah, I think you ought to cancel that trip if this continues to escalate. Maybe go take a few days off. Of course, you still write stories. You can't control yourself when you do take off 2 weeks a year for your holiday. I'm about to have to cancel my little 2-day fishing trip. My wife and kids are already on their way out to a cabin, and I'm calling them up saying, I don't think I'll be there. We'll see what happens. The point is, the reason I might as well stay here is that even if I leave town and Burmis is in here sitting in, I'll just be down the street on a landline calling in at a hotel room to the show. So one way or the other, I'll be here the next 2 days. Watson, if you look at how World War I started with the assassination of the Crown Prince of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, if you look at how World War II started, if you look at how they prod and manipulate, they first build up enemies. The globalists built up Hitler and then went after him. They built up North Korea going after him, build up Pakistan, build up Iran. I mean, it's the same story over and over again. These bankers literally build the Soviets so they can be an enemy. The CIA funds Castro and then supposedly loses control of him. They do the same thing over and over and over again, and there's no doubt that they armed North Korea. There's no doubt they armed Pakistan. The Pakistani president goes on TV and says the West is controlling Taliban and Al-Qaeda to commit assassinations and destabilize the government. Only about a third, most of the populous cities, so it's most of the population, but it's about a third of the geography. I've seen the maps of what Pakistan even controls today, and they're losing control of their nation, just like Russia lost control of Afghanistan to CIA-controlled operatives. And, we're not defending Pakistan or defending Russia. Facts are facts. And then our media has such contempt for the American people that they tell us Taliban and Al-Qaeda are with the Pakistani government. I mean, how asinine is that? And they clearly launched the attacks on India. And we had the former head of Pakistani intelligence, Hamid Gul, on, breaking that down. I mean, it's the same MO over and over. Clearly looking at this picture, they're trying to make the entire world descend into regional conflicts, and then NATO and the United States will play the part of saviors. Your take on that, Watson, and then let's get into who gave them the nukes.
Well, that's right. It's called order out of chaos. And this is why the major international arms smugglers are always protected at every turn by the military-industrial complex of U.S. intelligence agencies, namely Dr. A.Q. Khan, the father of Pakistan's atom bomb, who admitted in 2004 that he was the leader of a worldwide arms smuggling network that passed on both information related to construction of nuclear weapons, and also he had several front companies that manufactured key parts for centrifuges, which operated out of Dubai. And of course, these front companies shipped these nuclear components to Iran, Libya, and North Korea. Now, I've posted on prisonplanet.com about 20 minutes ago an article first written in October 2006, because it's more relevant than ever today, written by Greg Pallas, called How George Bush Gave Crazy Kim the Bomb. And it discusses the fact that before 9/11, and the memo was released after 9/11 by Greg Pallas via BBC Newsnight, top-level U.S. intelligence agent told Pallas and gave him documents proving it, that the FBI were issued by higher-ups a, quote, back-off directive, not only to people connected with the 9/11 patsy hijackers, so their movements couldn't be traced. And
W199I.
W199I. And also within W199I was an order to, quote, back off Khan Labs Pakistan the bomb. That's a direct quote out of the memo. Khan Labs Pakistan the bomb. So here you have, shortly before 9/11, in 2001, the FBI being ordered to back off A.Q. Khan while he was conducting this illegal international arms smuggling operation and giving nuclear technology and nuclear secrets not only to Iran but also to North Korea. And it goes back even further than that, because as far back as 1975 and also again in 1983, Dr. A.Q. Khan kept coming and going out of Holland, which made the Dutch authorities deeply suspicious of what he was up to. And they tried to arrest him for questioning in 1975 and 1983, but on both occasions the CIA intervened and said, leave him alone. And the Dutch authorities were prevented from arresting A.Q. Khan. And the former Dutch Prime Minister said, quote, the man was followed for almost 10 years, and obviously he was a serious problem. But again, I was told that the secret services could handle it more effectively. And he later stated that Khan was allowed to slip in and out of the Netherlands with the blessing of the CIA.
And the evidence goes on and on in your articles you've got up at prisonplanet.com. Another facet to that is the fact that we have ABB. It's not enough to have the technology and the know-how and the centrifuges. You need the fissile material. You need the uranium, the plutonium, and the reactors. And that was ABB. And who was the head of ABB? The European company, the Swiss company, when it transferred the systems in the mid-1990s. It all got blamed on Bill Clinton. He was certainly part of it. And Daschle was involved as well, mafia boss he is. But the bag man was good old Donald Rumsfeld.
That's right, and this was in 2000, 2 years before North Korea was declared part of the axis of evil by George Bush in his State of the Union speech. Now,
and then you've got Halliburton giving the nuke parts. You can't make this up. This is Associated Press. Halliburton goes, oh, well, we have a special allowance. We're allowed to give the nuke parts to Iran. I mean, folks, they're not patriots. They're here to suck you dry. The government doesn't care about you. They're a mafia. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rumsfeld was asked about that in 2002 when it came out. And he basically said he just doesn't remember. But then he had people who were on the board of ABB with him. Rumsfeld was an executive director getting paid nearly $200,000 a year, who said that he directly lobbied other war hawks to get the deal done, to get the light water reactors sold to North Korea. And at the time, the excuse was that light water reactors can't be used to make nuclear weapons, which is a bit of a strange thing to say when the United States at the time was, and still is today, chastising Iran for having light water reactors. But in the case of North Korea, they claimed they couldn't make nuclear weapons.
Well, there's also a different type of light waters, the type that, according to the weapons inspectors and physicists, that Iran has can be used, but it's very hard. The type of light waters given to North Korea by ABB and the West are the perfect type.
Henry Sokolsky, I've quoted in the article, head of the Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center, said, light water reactors could be used to produce dozens of bombs worth of weapons-grade plutonium in both North Korea and Iran. This is true of all light water reactors. And then he said, these reactors are like all reactors. They have the potential to make weapons, so you might end up supplying the worst nuclear violator with the means to acquire the very weapons we're trying to prevent it from acquiring.
Of course. I mean, you tell a good old boy this, they can't find Korea on a map, they just say, shut up, commie, we need to nuke them. And you're like, the government's taken our freedoms and our rights, our government's been hijacked, and they just look at you like you're an idiot, when meanwhile, Rumsfeld is running around arming everybody. I'm sick of these traitors wrapping themselves in the American flag, Paul.
I know. And then even after Bush declared them part of the axis of evil, he gave them another $95 million in 2002, and again, more money in January 2003. Those light water reactors, we're told, the building of them was suspended later on. So the key thing that I emphasize is the AQ Khan connection, because people say, oh, those reactors were dismantled and all this. But it's still interesting that they knew these light water reactors could produce nuclear bombs, and they were happy to give them to the Stalinist dictator Kim Jong-il when he was threatening to destroy the world at the same time, and actually firing missiles, that one of which, of the warhead, actually reached Alaska. That was reported by South Korean.
Oh, Hans Blix, oh no!
I don't think Hans Blix is going to be too keen on inspecting those weapons if the South Koreans and the US try to get that deal through.
Oh. Yeah, I try to make jokes about it. Gallows humor. Paul, do one more segment with us and an entire hour of your phone calls. I'm going to break down some other key points in economic news. This doesn't look good, folks. I mean, you got Israel running wild, saber-rattling, Russia doing it, China doing it, Japan doing it, North Korea doing it, South Korea doing it, Pakistan under al-Qaeda siege. We're going to go live at prisonplanet.tv. It's the second segment, 8 after next hour. I usually do about 3-4 hours live. We did yesterday. We did 3.5 live, but we always do at least an hour and 50 minutes or so live at prisonplanet.tv. Another reason to be a prisonplanet.tv subscriber, 5 years up and running since April 5 years ago, so 5+ years. All of my films in super high quality. My radio show simulcasted with documents and exclusive video clips, extras from my major films that are not in the films. We're about to put some of the extras that were not on the DVD of the Obama deception just for prisonplanet.tv members up next week for folks. Coming up next week on June 3rd, the Reflections and Warnings with Aaron Russo will be posted for prisonplanet.tv. More of the behind-the-scenes interview I never released at prisonplanet.tv before. You can also get that entire DVD, 90-plus minute presentation at Infowars.com. That is going to be shipping out starting next Monday. We just got those in, the DVDs today. We also now have the new monthly best of, the first monthly best of with David Icke, Alan Watt, and many, many others. That is available at Infowars.com. And your purchases also make this radio show possible. So I want to thank everybody for their support. Plus, these films are waking people up. Endgame, Obama Deception, Terror Storm, Fabled Enemies by Jason Burmis, Truth Rising. They are all so important. That's why the establishment's trying to demonize us and counter us. If you take action and get these films and make copies, nothing can stop us. But PrisonPlanet.tv, it just gets better and better. It's been redesigned, upgraded. A bunch of new functions are going to be added soon. Phase 2 of the upgrade. Check out PrisonPlanet.tv today because we're going to have quite a few new things. That new monthly best of is going to be up there next week. The new Aaron Russo presentation is going to be up there with a lot of never-before-seen footage starting next week at prisonplanet.tv. And your calls are coming up. Cal, Derek, Fred, Dave, John, Leo, and others in the next hour. Paul Watson, in the few minutes we've got left, so many angles, so many points to all this. Are you sharing my concern historically with the RAND Corporation documents saying they want this war and everything else, that that the globalists need a war, and that all over the world they're pulling out the stops to try to cause regional conflicts as a pretext for wider wars?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Obviously, whether this is going to be it, nobody knows, and the keystone on which it will rest will be China's reaction, because if they, commit to their agreement with North Korea to defend them, then it could escalate into a wider conflict. So cooler heads have got to prevail. We witnessed similar things in October 2006 when there was that first nuclear test, which basically turned out to be a nuclear fizzle. It wasn't a massive bomb by North Korea. But I'm seeing much more saber rattling after this time around. So hopefully it's going to die down again. But with the U.S. military-industrial complex busy coddling and protecting the biggest arms dealers in the world, like the CIA asset A.Q. Khan, who sold North Korea its nuclear weapons and the know-how with how to construct them, then anything's possible.
Absolutely. Hey, on a side note, Kevin Trudeau just text messaged me. Hi Kevin. Pretty wild to find out he's a podcast listener for years, Watson. That's interesting, huh?
Yes, it is.
That article about him saying he was hanging out with the Bilderberg people in Greece, by the way, is up on prisonplanet.com. Well, let's hope this isn't World War III, the beginnings of it, Paul Watson. We'll keep reading your reports.